In Africa, the arrival of children brings great joy to parents, relatives, friends, and everyone. Children, most especially twins, are seen as a blessing, and every family desires to have one. Some African cultures consider it a taboo to have twins. The killing of twins became a cultural practice in some African societies. In these societies, twin babies were believed not to be real human beings. They were seen as evil and were perceived as unlucky mini-gods, and it is believed that evil has befallen the community or family where they were born. Nkwelle was a land of peace and prosperity. There we are known for their rich culture, fertile farmlands, and prosperity. In this small community, having children was seen as a blessing, and each family took pride in their growing lineage. But for one couple, Olachi and Afam, the joy of raising children seemed out of reach. Olachi, a kind-hearted woman with a very soft voice, had married Afam many years ago. Afam, the only son in his family, was expected to continue in his family's lineage by having sons of his own. But after years of trying, they remained childless. Olachi had become pregnant several times, but each time she lost the baby only a few weeks before she was due to give birth. Olachi suffered repeated miscarriages, and each loss was more painful than the last. The continuous miscarriages broke her heart and made her grieve the more. No one could understand why Olachi couldn't carry a child, especially since both she and Afam were known to be healthy and fertile. As the years passed, the villagers began to talk about the couple. At first, they spoke in whispers, but soon, the gossip spread like a wildfire. Why does Olachi keep losing her babies? They asked. There must be something fundamentally wrong with her. Some even began to say that Olachi was cursed. To make matters worse, others said that she was using her unborn children for dark rituals. She's a witch, they muttered. Why else would her babies die every time? Olachi knew the rumors well. She could hear the quiet murmurs and gossips of the market women as she walked past, their eyes moving towards her belly and then quickly away. This hurt her so deeply, but there was nothing she could do to silence them. She had always wanted to be a mother, to have her children call her mommy, but the wrong notion that people had about her being a witch tore her apart. Every day she prayed, begging the gods to bless her with a child, but the pain of losing each pregnancy left her feeling hopeless, and alone. Afam, on the other hand, was her source of strength. He was a supportive husband. He loved Olachi with all his heart, and he stood by her side always, no matter what the villagers said. But even his family couldn't ignore the growing pressure. His parents and relatives, worried about their lineage, began to urge him to marry another woman. They believed that Olachi was to blame for their childlessness. They insisted that he take another wife, a fertile young woman who could bear him the sons and daughters needed to continue his family's name. One day, Afam's relative gathered in the family's compound. Olachi is cursed. She is a witch, they said. She is the reason your children die before they are born. She will never give you children. She is closing the door to your future. You must marry again, or our family's name will die with you. Afam shook his head. He looked at them and replied firmly, I love Olachi. I want to marry another woman. She is my wife, and I will stand by her no matter what. But his family wasn't willing to accept his decision. As time passed, they grew impatient and the pressure on Afam increased. His relatives constantly reminded him of his duty to continue the family's name, while the villagers continued to whisper and spread rumors behind Olachi's back. Olachi could feel the tension both in her home and in the village. She could sense the disapproval in the eyes of the market women as she passed by, and the way people looked away when she tried to join in their conversations. It was as though she had become an outcast, even though no one said it directly to her face. But Olachi's headache grew even deeper when she thought about her husband. She knew that Afam loved her, but she also knew that he was torn between his loyalty to her and the expectations of his family. She feared that one day he might give in to their demands and take another wife, leaving her alone in her grief. Yet, despite everything, Afam remained loyal. He refused to abandon Olachi, even though his family continued to pressure him. His relatives brought several young women to his home, each looking more beautiful than the last. They hoped that he would choose one of them to replace Olachi. But for every time they brought young maidens to his compound, Afam sent them away. His love for his wife Olachi grew stronger than the traditions that tried to pull them apart. He loved Olachi with all his heart, and he couldn't imagine his life with anyone else. He felt that one day, despite all the odds, she would give him a child. As more time passed, the villagers' whispers grew louder, and Olachi felt the weight of her reputation growing darker. She was not even considered a woman by many. She had become the subject of gossip, a woman fast gaining a notorious name, seen as cursed and dangerous. But despite it all, she had hope. She prayed that one day, the gods would bless her with a child she had always longed for, and that her name would no longer be associated with barrenness, shame, and sorrow. As more years passed, the pressure on Afam increased. The elders of the family, especially Afam's paternal uncles, gathered at his home more frequently, and every visit was more heated and intense than the previous one. They were running out of patience, and they could no longer tolerate what they saw anymore, as they considered Olachi a monumental failure. They believed that Afam had been charmed by Olachi because they couldn't understand his refusal to marry another woman. One afternoon, Afam sat in his father's compound, surrounded by his uncles and cousins. The older men spoke with authority, their voices low but firm, as though they had already made a decision for him. Afam, his uncle began, with a stern face, "This is not just about you. This is about our family's future. You are the only son, and the one who must carry our name forward. We cannot allow Olachi to keep you from doing that." Afam was quiet, but within him was a rising wave of anger. He loved his family, but their words felt like an attack on the woman he loved. "Olachi is my wife," Afam said with a steady voice. "I chose her, and I will stand by her." His uncle's face twisted in frustration. "She has given you nothing, Afam. How many more years will you wait? How many more dead children must we see? If she cannot give you children, Then it is time to find a woman who will. This is not a choice. It is your duty. Afam clenched his fists, but yet he kept his voice calm. I will not marry another woman. I don't care how long it takes. I know Olachi will give me children. The room grew tense, and Afam's words hung in the air like a challenge to them. His uncles exchanged glances with each other, and their frustration was written over their faces. We have already made arrangements, one of his older cousins finally said. There is a young woman from Nkanu, the neighboring village. She is strong, healthy, and beautiful. We have spoken to her family, and they are ready to agree to the marriage. It is done, Afam. Afam's heart raced. His relatives had already begun planning his future with another woman without his knowledge. The betrayer stung him deeply. You have no right, he said quietly, his voice trembling with anger. This is my life, my marriage, and my decision. But his words fell on deaf ears. His family believed they were doing what was best, not just for him, but for the entire lineage. They couldn't understand his loyalty to Olachi, and they refused to let one woman stand in the way of their future. Days later, the young woman they had chosen finally arrived at Afam's home with her bags. His family, having paid the bride price and performed the traditional rites, believed that Afam would welcome her. She was beautiful and gorgeous to look at. She carried a soft smile on her face. She was meant to be his new wife, chosen by his family to bear the children they longed for. But when Afam saw her standing at his doorstep with her luggage in her hand, he became furious. He couldn't believe his family had gone behind his back, arranging his future without his consent. What are you doing here? He demanded with a harsh voice. The young woman's face faltered, with the confusion spreading across her face. Your family sent for me, she said softly. I'm here to be your wife. Afam shook his head, his anger bubbling to the surface. No, he said firmly. You are not my wife. I have a wife, and her name is Olachi. You need to leave here now. Tears filled the young woman's eyes as she looked down at the ground, clearly humiliated and embarrassed. She had come with the hope of starting a new life, only to be rejected, thrown out, and embarrassed. But Afam wouldn't bend. He gathered her belongings and escorted her out of his home, his voice stern as he warned her, Don't ever come back here. When the word finally reached his family, they were outraged. His uncle stormed into his home later that evening, with their faces burning red with anger. Afam, his uncle shouted, what have you done? Do you realize what this means? You have humiliated that girl and her family. You have embarrassed us. Afam stood his ground. I will not marry another woman, he repeated. I love Olachi. She is my wife, and that will not change. The tension between Afam and his family grew stronger with each passing day. His refusal to bend to tradition marked him as stubborn in the eyes of the elders. But to Olachi, he was a hero. She knew the pressure he faced, and it filled her heart with love and gratitude that he chose to stand with her despite everything. Yet, Olachi could feel the weight of her own guilt growing heavier She couldn't bear the thought that she was the reason for Afam's conflict with his family. She loved him deeply, but she feared that she would never give him the children he so desperately wanted. And the villagers continued to whisper. Every day, Olachi felt their eyes on her, judging her, blaming her. Her sadness deepened, and though Afam's loyalty gave her strength, but the growing tension and gossips in the village left her feeling more isolated than ever before. Months had passed since the tense confrontation between Afam and his family. Though the pressure to take another wife had not disappeared, Afam's firm stance had at least quieted the noise around him for a while. The village too seemed to have moved on from the recent drama, returning to their daily routines. But for Olachi, the weight of her losses remained heavy on her heart. She prayed every day, visiting the shrine and leaving offerings to the gods, hoping they would grant her the one thing she desired most, a child. Her faith was unshaken, and even though the hope of becoming a mother felt more distant with each passing year, she had begun to accept that maybe the gods had other plans for her, and that perhaps she was meant to live a life without children. But then, something extraordinary happened. One morning, Olachi woke up feeling different. She couldn't explain it, but there was a certain heaviness in her body that she hadn't felt in such a long time. She felt dizzy and weak, and as she sat on the edge of her bed, that was when it became clear to her that she was pregnant again. Her heart raced both with excitement and fear. After all the miscarriages she endured, she was terrified that this pregnancy would end in the same way. But there was something different about this time. She didn't want to get her hopes up, but a tiny spark of joy flickered inside her. Olachi didn't tell anyone at first, not even her husband Afam. She was too scared that the news would bring unwanted attention, and she didn't want to relieve the pain of another loss in front of the entire village. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Olachi's pregnancy remained strong. The fear that had gripped her heart began to loosen, and she dared to believe that this time she would become a mother. When she finally told Afam, his joy was indescribable. He wrapped his arms around her and cried tears of happiness, thanking the gods for blessing them at last. But they decided to keep the news to themselves for as long as they could, afraid that the villagers' whispers and negativity would somehow bring bad luck. They told no one, not even Afam's family, as they waited for the month to pass. But as Olachi's belly grew, it became impossible to hide her pregnancy any longer. The villagers, always keen observers, soon noticed the change in her. The whispers began again, but this time, the tone was different. "She's pregnant again, oh. This happens every year," they said. "Okay now, let's see how long it lasts. She will lose this one too, just like the others," they said. Olachi herself was filled with fear, knowing what had happened before, but she prayed fervently that this time things would be different. The village had come to expect Olachi's pregnancy to end in tragedy, and few believed that this one would be any different. People talked behind her back, placing silent bets on when she would lose the baby. But as the months passed, Olachi's pregnancy continued, and soon it became clear that something miraculous was about to happen. The day of her delivery finally arrived. The village gathered, waiting for the inevitable outcome they had witnessed so many times before. But instead of tragedy, they were met with joy. Olachi gave birth not to one, but two beautiful, healthy baby girls, twins. The news spread like wildfire and the entire village was in shock. The birth of twins had never occurred in Nkwelle before, and the villagers were astonished. They had expected yet another miscarriage, but instead, Olachi had become blessed with not one, but two children. This was nothing short of a miracle. For the first time in years, the villagers spoke of Olachi with respect instead of suspicion. "She's blessed by the gods," they whispered. "To carry twins? Oh, bless the gods. This is a sign," they said. The village erupted in celebration. People from all corners of the village and even from neighboring towns came to see the newborns. They marveled at their beauty and health, showering the family with gifts of money and baby items. The girls were named Chidinma and Nmesoma. Twins were seen as a sign of divine favor, and the villagers rejoiced, praising the gods of the land for this extraordinary blessing upon the couple after many years of childlessness and suffering. But despite the joy and celebrations, there was a quiet sense of discomfort among the villagers. This was because twins were rare in the village, and even though they were considered a blessing by many, there was also something mysterious about their sudden appearance. The villagers marveled at the beauty of Chidinma and Nmesoma, but behind their smiles, there was a lingering feeling that the birth of these twins was just the beginning of something much larger and more powerful than anyone could imagine. As Chidinma and Nmesoma grew, they became the darlings of Nkwelle. The village of Nkwelle adorned the miracle girls wherever they went, and wherever the twins went, they drew attention, and people couldn't help but shower them with affection. Men, women, and children alike were drawn to them, captivated by their laughter and beautiful smiles. Every day, the twins were given treats, gifts, and were showered with love by the villagers who felt honored just to be in their presence. The twins' early years were marked by joy and admiration. Olachi had become the mother she had always longed to be, and she cherished every moment. She often watched her daughters play, her heart swelling with pride. Afam too felt like the most blessed man in the village. His love for his daughters was fierce, and the family seemed finally to have found peace after many years of struggle. But as the twins grew, strange things began to happen. Things that no one could explain. It all started with small harmless incidents. One afternoon, the twin girls went to the market where Mommy Agnes, a well-known yam seller in the village, had her shop. Mommy Agnes was a formidable woman, known for her hot temper. The twins, who had always been carefree, decided to take pieces of roasted yam without asking. When Mommy Agnes noticed what had been done, she became furious. She grabbed a cane and began to beat the twins. She expected them to cry and run away as other children would. But something unexpected happened. Instead of wailing in pain, the twins looked at each other and laughed. Mommy Agnes, confused by their reaction, continued to strike them. The more she beat them, the louder their laughter grew. The other market women watched what was going on and were shocked with disbelief written all over their faces. Mommy Agnes, now frightened, demanded to know why they weren't crying. What kind of children are you?" she shouted, waving the cane in frustration. The twins stopped laughing. They smiled and said to her, "Your daughter will bear the consequence. She will face the punishment and dance to the rhythm of the music," Chidinma said calmly with a sweet voice. Mommy Agnes didn't understand what they meant. She dismissed their words as childish nonsense. But when she returned home later that evening, she found her daughter, young Agnes, lying on the floor, crying in pain. Cane marks covered her back, the same marks that should have been on the back of the twins. Mommy Agnes was horrified. How could this be? She hadn't touched her daughter all day, yet the marks on the girl's skin were undeniable. Unable to understand what had happened, Mommy Agnes rushed to tell other villagers what had happened, but they were skeptical. "You must be mistaken," they said. "Maybe your daughter hurt herself somehow and doesn't want to tell you the truth." No one believed that the twins had anything to do with it. They dismissed Mommy Agnes' story as an overreaction. They thought that she was either lying or imagining things. But in her heart, Mommy Agnes knew something strange was happening. As time went on, more strange occurrences followed. The twins began to display abilities that no one in the land of Nkwelle could explain. One afternoon, while they were playing near a tall mango tree in the village, a group of children watched in admiration as Chidinma and Nmesoma plucked fruit from the highest branches without ever climbing the tree. It was as if the fruit simply fell into their hands. The other children were awestruck, excited, cheering, dancing and clapping because they had a lot of fruit to eat that day. When they got home, they told their parents what they had seen. The parents warned their children to stay away from Chidinma and Nmesoma. They didn't know what was going on, but they knew enough to be wary and careful. "There is something strange about those twins," they said. "We don't even know what they are capable of." It was the second strange report about the twins, and now, even their beauty and charm couldn't cover the growing uneasiness in the village. The news sent fear in the heart of people in the village. Little by little, the distance between the twins and the other villagers grew. At first, Olachi and Afam didn't notice the change. They were still basking in the joy of raising their twin daughters, unaware of the growing unease and discomfort around them. But soon, the twins themselves started to notice that the other children no longer played with them as they used to. When they would approach their usual group of friends, the children would quickly make excuses and leave. Chidinma and Nmesoma were left standing alone, confused and hurt by the sudden coldness they faced. One evening, as the twins played quietly in their compound, they asked their mother, "Why don't the other children want to play with us anymore?" Olachi paused, not knowing how to answer. She had noticed the shift, but she hadn't wanted to believe it. "Maybe they're just busy," she said gently, trying to hide the worry in her face. But deep down, Olachi feared that the villagers were beginning to see her daughters as something other than a blessing. Despite the isolation they received, the twins remained close to each other and they were happy to be in one another's company. They had no idea that the rumors about them were growing by the day. The villagers, once eager to be near them, now avoided them altogether and with each incident, the fear surrounding the twins intensified. This was just the beginning. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to this channel to enjoy more super African folktales and stories from us. This is just the part 1 of this story, and if you would like to see a part 2, comment part 2 in the comment section and I will be glad to drop that on this channel. Thank you so much once more for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye.